is, I think, a really exciting day here at Our Redeemer. I always want to say Grace, because that was my church for 14 years, but at Our Redeemer, we're very excited. Not only is it Pentecost, and I like to see all that red out there, but did anybody that did not receive a paper, and I'll give it to you. I'm holding this one, Lalitha, you can have that. So, okay, just a moment. I don't want to take up Dr. Mount's time. I just want to say this is the day that Our Redeemer is getting on board with a very important campaign that is going on at the City Mission to provide another shelter for homeless women. With what is there, there's already shortage. And so this is an attempt to reach to be able to create more as needed. So you'll notice that what you've gotten either coming into worship or now in this forum is a sheet that will give you some details, especially about how Our Redeemer is participating, along with a pledge card, commitment card, whatever you want to call it. We have a generous family, anonymous giving up to 100, oh my gosh, don't anyone have a heart attack, up to $50,000 of our gifts and commitments, and those need to be made, either the gift or gift and commitment that would be paid over the next year into 2025 by the end of June, and that's how we will establish what our matching amount is here at Our Redeemer. So if you have questions, we'll be talking about this over the next several weeks. Information for folks who aren't here. I already had a couple people that had to go today that said, we're very much in support of the mission and you'll be getting a response from us, but we need to go right now. But anyway, so just if you have questions about the specifics of here at Our Redeemer, please don't hesitate to ask. And now I'm very excited to introduce to you Dr. Sally Mounts, who is the Director of Development. That's my shortened title for her. She has a much bigger title at the City Mission. Welcome, Sally.
Pastor Martha, thank you so very much, and thank you all for having me. I was at your wonderful service this morning, and I heard Pastor Martha's talk to the children. There weren't any children here, so she used the entire congregation as children, and she said that we have a church inside and we have a church outside. And I was very struck by that because you are one of our largest church supporters at City Mission, and I want to thank you for that very, very much, very much. My name is Sally, and I'm a retired Army officer. I grew up right down the street, went to McGuffey High School. We played Peters Township in football, and we lost to you a whole bunch of times. But I went to college, joined the Army, retired as a lieutenant colonel, came back home, and went to volunteer at the City Mission, and knew the first day I walked in there that I wanted to work there. I have been there now for 12 years. And I said this morning at the service that there's a reason why when there are homeless everywhere you read about, when there are homeless in cities all around us, even in southwestern Pennsylvania, when there are homeless in Pittsburgh, when there are homeless down in West Virginia, that you can walk from the top of North Main, where the Washington Hospital is, all the way down to the bottom of South Main, going across every street in Washington, and not see one homeless person. You can walk through Cannonsburg and not see one cardboard box that houses a homeless person. You can walk through McMurray and not see one tent encampment of homeless people. And that is because the wonderful people of this region, including you, have supported City Mission's efforts to help the homeless for the last 84 years. And what happens is that those people who come into our homeless program, we're all Christians, we sign a statement of faith, we don't accept government funding except for our buildings, but we don't accept it for our programs because the government will say, well, we'll help you build this building, but you can't pray in this building. Well, no, we'll help you build this building, but you can't actually make people go to their rehabilitation classes on anger and triggers and relapse management. No, well, we'll help you build this building, but you can't hold any devotions in this. No. Our residents go to devotions every morning. They go to chapel every week. All of the staff at City Mission, all 130 of us, are Christians, and we believe in the healing power of the blood of Jesus Christ. So I want to tell you a little bit about City Mission and then talk just a little bit about this program. And I just have to tell you that I am a bit of a long-winded, passionate person about City Mission. Well, one of the ladies, Ruth, where's Ruth? Ruth said, please don't be upset with me if I leave before your talk ends, but I live at Country Meadows and the bus leaves early and it's not your talk, it's not you. So if you have to leave, I won't think that that's any kind of referendum on what I'm saying about City Mission. Hi, Ruth. She's hiding her head from me. So when she leaves, we all have to say goodbye to Ruth. Okay, just have to tell you. Okay, Gary, if you could move to the next slide here. That's City Mission in Washington, PA, 84 West Wheeling Street. Thank you. It's a 174-bed rehabilitative program in Washington, PA. We have 4 distinct populations of the homeless: men, women, women with children, and veterans. They live in 4 separate shelters. They are each manned 24 hours a day with staff. Manned most during the day, then there's a staff group that works from 3 to 11, and then a staff that works from 11 to 7 in the morning, okay? So that's what we do. And our mission is to share Christ, to shelter, to heal, and to restore the homeless to independent living, one person at a time. And the reason that you don't see homeless in this region is because once they've gone through our program, then they go right back into the fabric of our society. They are pastors, they are phlebotomists, they are nurses, they are ministers. A number of them are ministers. They are employees of City Mission. About a third of our staff is former members of our City Mission. And Doug Bush, who was here before, you may have known him. Doug sadly passed away of cancer about a year ago. Still lives on very much in spirit in the mission. But I know that he would come to our Redeemer Lutheran and talk about the grace of Christ and a Christ-centered program. Now, I have to tell you one thing we do in a Christ-centered program. We don't say you can only stay 30 days and you have to leave. We don't say you have to be in by 8 o'clock or we're going to kick you out and you can never apply back here again. We don't say we're going to let you out on the streets at 8 o'clock, come back tonight at 10. Our people have a very active rehabilitation program, and that is why they go back into society in Washington, in Waynesburg, in Canonsburg, in Greene County, right? And that is why they are not living homeless anymore, because we have moved them from homelessness to independent living. Now, I will tell you that there are missions out there that we call 3 hots and a cot. That means you get a bed and you get some food, and that's great if you don't have a bed and you don't have food. But what we are most interested in is using the healing power of Jesus Christ to teach them another way to live. 85% of them have serious problems with alcohol and drugs. About half of that population has some serious mental illness. About half of that population, again, has serious medical problems. There are so many ropes tied around these people with tough knots that keep them in homelessness. And I can tell you that although homelessness cuts across every socioeconomic level, and that a 2019 study from one of the insurance companies said that 59% of Americans are only one paycheck away from homelessness, all right, that most of these people do not have the benefits that we had growing up. I grew up in Washington. My mom was a nurse at Washington Hospital. My dad worked at one of the glass factories. When I was 8 years old, I wanted to go to West Point, and I actually became an Army officer and retired and came back home. But the truth is that there were 4 of us children, and we all had aspirations beyond high school. We knew what we wanted to do. All right, I can tell you that I was out cleaning the Wild Things Stadium with a group of the residents one day a couple of years ago, and one of them looked out over the stadium, and we were cleaning it for the Pony League. And he said, "Boy, I wish I'd had a place like this to go when I was 8 years old." And I was thinking back to my own wanted to go to West Point, and I was out playing Army with my brothers and my cousins. And I said, "John, what were you doing when you were 8 years old?" And he said, "Drinking." My older brothers both drank. My uncles drank. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had died. I had my first drink at 8, my first drunk at 10. And that's the trajectory of John's life until he came to City Mission. Or I could tell you about a man who was doing fine in life. He had great things going on, and then a drunk driver crossed the median, hit the car that held his wife and 2 children, killed them, and then he started drinking because he could never sleep, because every time he slept, he had nightmares about that accident. Or I can tell you about the girl who actually worked for us for a while, whose father would take her and her brother at age 9, put them in the basement, bring in a group of men who would take bets on these kids as they fought to see who would draw first blood. They were child gladiators. This is the people who were supposed to love and care for these children. So often what we find is that they just don't have the kinds of lives that we have as middle-class Americans. Not just money, but good parenting, good schools, good examples. We find so often when we do work readiness that our residents don't know the most basic things. I don't know about you, but I'm 70 years old, and when I was 15, I was working at the local Weber's custard place on Route 40. And boy, did I learn from Mr. Weber. I learned you show up on time. I learned when there's more customers, you work faster. I learned you keep everything clean. I learned that 85 cents an hour was a lot of money at that time. All right, Mr. Weber wrote me my recommendation for college, and I worked there for 4 years. But I learned so much because I'd watched my mother as a nurse, I'd watched my father as a glass blower, I'd watched my aunts and uncles work, and I had really good examples, and then I got to work. Well, our residents haven't had those examples, and so we have to say, you can't wear dirty, holy blue jeans, and you can't argue with your boss when he gives you something to do, and if you don't like something that your boss said, you can't walk away, because they didn't have the examples that we had. They didn't have parents who set an example for them, which is more important than anything that parents say, because their parents were in jail, or they were no longer living, they were in the foster care system. These parents were addicts themselves. And so that's the kind of way that they started in life. So what's so great about City Mission is that with your help, we don't treat them as anything other than neighbors who need a hand up, not a handout. A hand up, not a handout. And our success is when a person says to us, I got a job, I got an apartment key, I got a car, I have a home church, right? That's what we try to do. Next slide, please, Gary. All right, it is an expensive thing. And let me tell you that as a person who comes from this region, right, who traveled all over the world in the Army, Turkey, and I was all over Europe. And what I love about this region is the generosity of the people who live here. And that's one of the reasons that I've stayed. It costs a lot of money every year to run City Mission. It's about $7.8 million, right? 174 people, $7.8 million. But you look at that, and you take this number, and you multiply that in the 84 years since 1941, and you understand why we don't have a homeless problem. Because we don't say, you need to get out. We get them in a program, and we keep them an average of 155 days. And we try very, very hard. Some of them, nobody really likes living in a homeless shelter, all right? They want to move on with their lives, and we try to get them to stay longer than 90 days. Because if they stay longer than 90 days, our ratios go up, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Okay, next slide, please, Gary. These are who we currently serve. We have 90 beds for men, 29 beds for women. We have a women's and children's shelter. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. Right now we have 21 kids in the shelter, all right? And then we have a 22-bed veteran shelter. 22 beds because in America, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. So we have a 22-bed veterans shelter, total of 174 beds, and when we get the new shelter in, we're going to have another 35 beds. So this is it's the preeminent shelter, homeless shelter of the region. Okay, next slide, please. This is just to give you kind of an idea of what we do, because we don't just serve the homeless, all right? Once we've fed our residents, we open the doors to the people in the projects in Washington. And a number of them have said, we get about 30 of them per meal, right? And a number of them have said, if I didn't get my meals free at the City Mission, I wouldn't be able to buy medication, or I wouldn't be able to pay my rent, or I wouldn't be able to keep gas in my car. So we know that we help that next level. The thing about City Mission is we help 3 levels of homelessness or potential homelessness. We help the working poor in Washington. Right? Washington County has 200,000 people. 10% of them live below the federal poverty guidelines. So those people need a lot of help if they're going to stay out of homelessness. And we help them we connect them to services, and we give them food from our food pantry that can come in once a week, and we give them school supplies, and we give them Christmas gifts for their kids. That's all that layer. Then we help the homeless, and then we have a very small population of chronic homeless in Washington, and they live down past the bowling alley on Jefferson Avenue near a creek that they call the beach, right? And there are about 25 or 30 of them. And they do not want to come to the shelter, no matter how hard we try. And what are the reasons? They want to continue to drink, or for some reason they're afraid because they've been hurt in shelters before, or they have a mental illness that doesn't allow them. So we reach out to them every other week right in our own shelter. They come in and we give them flu shots and pajamas and sleeping bags and food, a hot meal for the night. And when it's cold, we put them in our cold weather shelter, and they stay for a few nights until the temperature goes back up. So we help those 3 populations, the close to homeless, almost homeless, then the homeless, 174 of them, and then we help this very small chronic population of homeless that you have in any city. All right, people who just don't want to come to your shelter, but that's who we serve. So last year we served over 131,000 meals, 46,000 nights of shelter. We provided 15,000 medical interventions from doctors and nurses, because when you're homeless, you are not thinking about your COPD or your diabetes or the fact that you have a broken arm that didn't heal very well. You just don't think about those things. You think about where are you going to put your head that night, and what are you going to eat, and how are you going to keep yourself safe. So medical issues go by the wayside, and then they get, of course, a lot worse. So we do medical as well. All right. Then we gave 3,500 career training centers, because one of the things that you find in the world is that if you want to stay independent, you need some sort of a family-sustaining job. So we help our residents get jobs. Last year, we helped 129 residents get family-sustaining jobs. One of them is a phlebotomist at Washington Hospital. One of them is a student at Duquesne in the law school program. They finished the paralegal program, and now they want to be a lawyer. once you get them started on what sobriety and community in Christ feels like, then there's just really no limit to where they can go. All right, and then we provided 210 very robust career assessments. They come in, and we give them, it's like a 2-hour computer test, and it spits out a group of things that they could do. And we had one group came in from the jail across the street, because God gives second chances. One group came in, and one guy said, you're never going to find me a job. I am never going to be able to get a job in Washington County. And our coordinator is very passionate, said, let me just try, just put your numbers in here. Well, just answer this question. He answered all the questions. Came out that there were 19 jobs that he could take in Washington County. And the one that he liked the most, because he wanted to be outside, was the job where you hold those flags on the road, where cars go through, and one sign says slow, and one says stop, and then you radio the guy on the other end, and he lets those cars through. And he came back a month later, and he'd been given a promotion to be the head of his crew, and he had a little badge that said head, and he had to show that badge to all of us, and he loved that job. And that company was beginning to talk to him about benefits that he could have. So, and it's all, sometimes it's that, sometimes it's other things. We had a guy who wanted to go back to work at McDonald's, and actually since COVID, the rates have been really good. We said, okay, but how about going to our work center and getting some advantages? Let's have you work on some online courses. Because when you take online job courses, like if you want to work in a restaurant and you take online job courses on SafeServe or something like that, then whoever you're applying to, then they think that you're serious about this job. So this guy said, okay, I know pretty much everything there is to know about McDonald's. Let me take some first aid courses. So he took a CPR course, and he took a Narcan course, for if people overdose with drugs. He took a basic first aid course. He went in and applied for a job at McDonald's, and the manager said, we don't have anybody here who knows this much first aid. How about we make you the night manager? And he couldn't wait to come back to tell us, because these advantages, in little increments, they add up and they add up and they add up. And last year, 129 got family-sustaining jobs. Next. That's our holistic services. They start homeless. They come in, they get a meal and a bed, all right? Then they get a very advanced intake where we ask them all sorts of questions about their background. And then we individualize the care. What do they need? Now, so many of them, as I said, have drug and alcohol problems. So many of them have mental health problems, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder. And then we have, so many of them have medical problems. We connect them to a PCP. And then after they've been there for a month, they'll say, and they've gained some trust, so they start to trust the staff. They'll say, can I just talk to you about something? And we'll say, yeah, sure, what? And he would say, this guy said, I have some parking tickets in Wisconsin. And I said, okay, how many? He said, 60. I said, okay, are they just parking tickets? Well, no, they're from 1969, and the judge is so angry that he's put out a bench warrant, and they're coming here tomorrow. So it really does help that he's in a program. It really does help that we have case managers to advocate for him. We got him an attorney, a pro bono attorney, got those all lumped together, made out a payment plan. Before he left the mission, he had all 60 paid off, and he was no longer going to jail, which he was very excited about. Because when you don't have any support system, you tend to run from your problems. You don't work on them. And we say, stop. Your best thinking got you into a homeless shelter. Now, I'm no better than you. I'm a sinner too. But why don't you try it our way? We're all Christians here, and we believe that the grace of Jesus Christ cleanses you from all sin, and this is another chance. So try it our way. We don't make anybody accept Christianity. We don't shun anybody that doesn't accept Christianity. We've had guys go through our program with their Muslim prayer rug, and they walked out with their Muslim prayer rug because that was his religion, all right? We are going to do everything we can to love these people. And by the way, from us, that comes from Jesus Christ. So we do get a lot of our residents who become more spiritual while they're with us. Okay, and then we move them into an internship, and as I said, they simply don't know enough about the way you behave in normal situations to do very well in their jobs, which is one of the reasons why they leave a job. And then they're really frustrated, they have low self-esteem, and then they take a drink, and then they take a second drink, and then they're on a bender for 3 weeks, and then they're right back where they started. And it's a vicious cycle for the homeless in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Vermont. San Diego has a huge homeless population. It's just all over the place, all right? And what we need to do is move them from homelessness to independence. Now, the state of Pennsylvania, in all its wisdom, I love Pennsylvania, but the state of Pennsylvania, in all its wisdom, says we believe in rapid rehousing, and we want these people to just be put into apartments. So if you want any money from us, then you need to put these people in apartments. We said, unsuccessfully, to the state of Pennsylvania, look, City Mission's been doing this for 84 years. People need a program. They need to go through a rehabilitation program. It takes about 60 days for their brains to clear of the chemical mess that they have made up there by doing drugs and alcohol. And the state of Pennsylvania said, nope, if you want our money. So we had this program where we had 14 apartments all around Washington, PA, all right? And here's what happens. They'll put somebody in one of them without a program where people understand why it's important to stay sober. And then we'll get a call from that landlord 3 months later because that guy took drugs, went on a huge bender, decided he wanted a swimming pool in his apartment, opened all of his spigots, water flooded his apartment, flooded the downstairs apartment, flooded the first floor apartment, and he owed that landlord $30,000. We say, let's get a program, guys. Let's get people to the point where they really understand what sobriety means. Next, please. And then you can stay sober. And these are the kinds of things that we offer. We have lots and lots of wraparound services. As I said, we're very proud of not being a 3 hots and a cot shelter. Medical, we do full medical assessments, medical treatment planning. We connect them with a PCP, a primary care provider, that they have after they leave the mission. We have dental referrals, chiropractic care. We connect them to insurance. Most of them come in without medical insurance, all right? And we do all of these tests when they come in. Hepatitis, we do COVID, we do AIDS, we do everything. And then if they're veterans, we connect them to VA services as well. In clinical, we do counseling, case management, recovery. We have a lot of recovery classes. What are your triggers? What makes you need to be an alcoholic? What trauma are you running away from? What family bridges have you broken that we could repair? Face these problems with us, beside you, and your life will be a whole lot better. We teach budgeting. We require chapel services. And we do referrals, and we do a lot of parenting classes because we have 11 mothers and 21 of their kids there, and they don't always know how to parent correctly, okay? And then careers. Well, we just said, okay, let's get them jobs. Well, it's not that simple anymore because to get a job, you need an ID card. And your ID card has to have your name and your address on it to be put into a computerized system. If you don't have that ID card, then you can only get jobs under the table, right? So we for a lot of years, we did this, and we said, okay, here's what you need. Now you're ready to get a job, go get a job. And they'd come back and they'd say, it didn't work, it didn't work, it didn't work. And then they finally told us, we didn't have the required identification to get into their payroll system. So now the first thing we ask them is, do you have a state ID with your name and address? Do you have a social security card? Do you have a birth certificate? And if they don't, and they don't, they just don't. They lost it at their last homeless shelter. Their mother never gave it to them. Their wife divorced them, and she was so angry she burned all of his goods. She ran away in the middle of the night to escape abuse. They don't have those identification cards, so we get them for them, hand them to them, and say, this is your identity. Don't ever lose it again. Don't ever lose this. And then when they go into a job at Marty Buechner's Accutrex, all right, then they take that card and it goes right into the payroll system. And all of a sudden, they have a job that is over the table with benefits. And it starts to change their self-esteem, right? Okay, and then also legal, like I said, we do expungement days. If people have some sort of a misdemeanor from 20 or 30 years ago, we try to get that expunged because it does affect whether you can get a job or not. And we have attorney referrals. We have a lot of pro bono attorneys who help in Washington as well. And we send letters of support. You wouldn't believe how judges respond when a counselor will write and say, he's been sober for 4 months, he's been working at City Mission, things are really, he's really trying to change his life. That kind of an advocate really helps in the legal system. Okay, next one, please. These are our recovery rates, and this is what I'm most proud of at City Mission. I have to tell you, I mean, I was in the Army. I was in the world's greatest Army, the United States Army. I retired a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. And God is greater than any army that ever marched the earth, greater than any civilization that ever existed, greater than any man or woman who lived on this planet. God does move in their lives. The Holy Spirit moves in their lives. So here's what we do. We measure 5 things with each of the residents: housing, employment, income, recovery, and spirituality. Housing is, do they have a house when they're ready to leave? Employment is, do they have a good job, a family-sustaining job when they leave? Income, if they can't get a job, like they're disabled somehow, then do they have something? Do they have some sort of government assistance that will allow them to keep their rent going? Okay, and then there are 3 kinds of recovery that we look for. We look for recovery from drugs and alcohol. We look for recovery from mental health or stabilization. There are really wonderful drugs now that, if they're given correctly and you work with doctors, that you can really function very, very well with a lot of the conditions that people thought you could never function with. So we help them stabilize their mental health. We help them stabilize their medical condition, and we help them find a home church. Connection to a church and acceptance of Christ as your personal Savior is the spiritual aspect. And that is one of the things we measure when they come in, when they leave, and every 90 days they go through the program. So you can see why you can't do it in 30 days. It's a lot to do to move somebody from homelessness to independence to the point where they can stay independent. All right? Next slide, Gary, please. And to help us out, we have 8 thrift stores all throughout. You've seen them. There's one down in Strabane, there's one in Canonsburg, there's one in Washington. So our thrift stores, people like all of you, well, when COVID happened, you all cleaned out your closets and you brought all of that back to City Mission and gave it to us. And we have a vocational training center. It's like the beating heart of these 8 thrift stores. We truck things out to the thrift stores. The thrift stores sell them, and every bit of profit from the thrift stores comes back to the programs and services for the homeless. Last year it was $330,000. We had extra, so it went right back into programs and services for the homeless. So when we go to grant funders and people like that, we not only have good statistics to show them about our residents, but we also say we're trying to become sustainable, and we run these 8 thrift stores. And in addition, a lot of our residents do work internships, and they learn soft skills and work behaviors in these internships. Okay, thank you. Okay, now I want to talk for just a minute about the women's shelter. Largest population of homeless is women with children. If that isn't the saddest thing. Used to be women were about 10% of the homeless. Now they're 40% of the homeless, okay? And it's really, really hard for women out on the streets. Next slide, please. Okay? So what we said, we went out to the community, and we may have asked some of you, but we asked a lot of people, leaders, ministers, CEOs, we asked major donors, what does this region need in the next 10 years? And they said, this region needs more services for women and more programs for women. At City Mission, we have some women's beds. We have a women's shelter for 14, then we have a Next Step shelter for women for 15 beds, and then we have 11 mothers' beds, then they can have up to 3 children with them. But you know what? We turn away 60 women a month. And I've seen the stats, I've seen the notebooks where they keep track of it. 60 women a month are turned away because we are full to capacity. So we said, we're going to build a new 50-bed women's shelter, transfer our women who are in our old shelter. It's a 100-year-old building, all right? It's going to cost us about $7.3 million. We've raised 6.6. We've raised $6.6 million. And that's why it is just so touching that this church, this is the only church that's doing something like this. This church has a very generous donor who is matching your campaign donations up to $50,000. And then it will be a gift from the church, and you can rejoice with us once we open this shelter next May 25. Okay, so we're starting it now. The construction company, Mosites Construction, has already put the fences around. Our groundbreaking ceremony is coming up. And this says we've raised, $6.61 million is what we've raised. Okay. Go on here. And I just want to talk to you for a minute about the causes of homelessness in women, because I have been talking for about half an hour, and it's time for you to relax and grab a donut. Like I said, we receive an average of 10 calls per day. We turn away 60 women a month at City Mission, and it breaks our heart to turn those women away. 80% of homeless women self-report trauma as the main reason that they're homeless. That means, do we have enough domestic violence shelters? Do we have enough programs for these women? Are they using alcohol or drugs because their boyfriend uses alcohol and drugs? What's the situation? We need to fix that, all right? Women falling into homelessness usually do not have any kind of a support system, and they don't have available to them the kinds of social services that women with children usually have, all right? They have greater mental health concerns. They have greater instances of suicidal ideation. They have more suicide attempts. And if you put a woman out on the street for a month, 50% report symptoms of major depression after 1 month. So you can imagine what it would be. And there's an even sadder statistic. Next slide, please. A homed woman in southwestern Pennsylvania lives an average of 79 years. A homeless woman lives an average of 49 to 59 years, 20 or 30 years less than those of us who have homes. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, we did this needs assessment study, and if you can show us the next slide, there were a lot of comments from social service providers. There have been as many as 70 women on our waiting list. We have a long wait list for women. There's never enough room for women and women with children. We've seen a huge increase in women needing services. Expanding the women's shelter is most important. So that is City Mission's calling for the next project that we have to do. We have 174. We'll get another 35 beds. It'll be a wonderful place for women to heal and to grow. Now remember, in government programs, they give you money. They'll say, like they do in the VA, our alcohol program is 30 days. After 30 days, you have to leave. Okay? Or they'll say, you can go through this program once but never again. Well, 30 days isn't enough time for your spit to dry. I mean, it really is not enough time to do anything in an alcohol program. Right? So we get them, and we're going to put them in these programs, and we're going to say, Jesus Christ is the answer, right? City Mission is really going to help you. We're going to give you all of these resources, and you are going to leave here, if you work the program, you'll leave here with a key and with a job and with a way to get around. Now, I'll tell you, I had a physician once tell me, he said, I'll tell you something about Washington. It's really interesting. He said, you walk down the street in Pittsburgh, somebody tries to sell you heroin. You walk down the street in Washington, somebody tries to get you to go to an AA meeting. That's because we have lots of AA meetings. We have 2 big ones for the community in our own cafeteria, right? One on Tuesday night, one on Thursday night. They get 160 people. A lot of them are former residents, and a lot of them are just people who are in the AA community. Doug Bush was a huge, huge supporter of that AA community and spoke often, AA and NA. And so you can fall in with a wonderful community, plus we have a speaker's jam on New Year's Eve, and we really, really try to encourage sobriety, and it really helps. Next comment. And this is our shelter. So we're pretty crammed up at City Mission. The town really doesn't want us to spread out anymore because they can't get taxes from a nonprofit. So they say, you can grow up, but not out. So we found this little spot over here. And we are going to put our women's shelter right on our property. And it is going to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Does anybody have any questions about what I've said? Yes.
You might not know the answer, but I wonder how long the congregation has to reach the matching goal.
I'm Pastor Martha. Bye, Ruth.
So if you take a look at the sheet that you were given along with the commitment card, what we are doing here, and this is why you have a separate sheet just for here, is that you have until June 30th to respond with something as that card asks for. You could give a gift, you know, if you can go home and open up an account and give something nice next week, we'd be glad to receive it. If you think about it and you need to give your gift over a period of time that includes next year, you can do that, but we need to know what it will be. Excuse me, I'm having so much trouble this morning. Our wonderful donors have said that they trust you and that they go by your commitment, and then you will work with the mission on fulfilling that commitment. So you need to turn in one of those cards, and you have until the end of June. In my opinion, sooner the better. But it's at the end of June that we'll tally up and then know the amount of the matching grant and be able to say to the congregation, like we did with the Lutherland, to be able to say, here's our amount. Same thing we did with Lutherland. We made commitments, and now those of us that made multi-year commitments, we get reminded by Lutherland or ourselves to keep up with that gift. Did that answer what you're asking, Tammy? Okay, thanks.
Take that card and then check, just put it in an envelope, maybe put an offering or something.
Yeah, we can, yeah. We're cheap around here, and we didn't give you an envelope. If you need an envelope, I have one in my office. I'll bring one for you. But no, yeah, exactly, Drew. That's what we figured, that we tried to make the card so you can put it into an envelope in. Somebody's already given one back that was kind of stapled in a smaller envelope. If you take it home, you can get an office-size one and just return it. It would probably be easier for the counters if you wrote on the top of it that this is City Mission. We need to be careful because I see John Till's standing back there. John, do you remember, did we agree that it's going to be Hope? Okay, City Mission Hope Campaign is some facsimile of that is what we need on your check, so that it's different than your regular donations to City Mission, which of course we hope will continue. We will continue to collect not only food, but those who generously donate to City Mission through our congregation, we still would take those gifts, of course, and want to encourage them. So you need to just sort of put Hope Campaign, homeless, those are the kinds of words we need to have on your checks.
Any other questions? From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for being such generous givers to City Mission. Thank you for treating the homeless like neighbors, not less than you, because it makes all of the difference in the world in their lives. Thank you so much. I will be here. I'm going to stay for the next service. I stayed for the 9 o'clock, and I really liked it, so I'm going to stay again. And if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be here.